Fire it up, footballers! Fire it up, footballers! James here with Jiggly, co-hosting, and we have Danny Santaromita.
Yeah, pretty good. Better than most.
I have trouble with it.
Everyone does. It's okay.
So what is it, Danny?
Santaromita. You were very close.
Santaromita.
Got it.
I gotta stick Rome in there.
Yeah, sure. That's a good mnemonic device or something. Sure.
Yeah, Santaromita. I like it. But awesome. Thank you for taking the time to come along on today, and thank you, Jiggly, as well for taking the time. Thanks for everybody else taking the time. Hop on here. I see we got some people joining us live stream. We'll get the live chat going. But everybody knows why we're here. We're here to talk Gaitan. First off, right off the bat, like, subscribe, toss us a like. It lets us know how we're doing. We're not making any money off this, but we run off likes. It lets us know that we're doing our community due diligence. Take a look at True Marty's Fire for Food program. That's still going good. Always look into that. And that's business out of the way. Gaitan is coming to the Chicago Fire. What happened, Danny? How did this happen?
Well, it was an opportunistic move on the Fire's part. I mean, you look at the timing and the team that he came from, and it kind of left him with limited options. His Chinese club had signed a fifth foreign player, and you can only have four in that league, so they had to move one of them, and it was late February when they added that extra player. So all of a sudden you're looking at, the European transfer window's closed. There's only so many places in the world they can ship him to, or ship any of these players to, and it ended up being Gaitan. So yeah, the Fire and MLS, I guess, was, as far as I've heard, that the Chinese team reached out to MLS in some capacity, and the Fire were the team that was able to take advantage. So opportunistic, it makes them a better team. I'm sure we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how he's going to fit in, but yeah, it was definitely a right place, right time for the Fire.
It's interesting because I know Portland is looking for a striker, but Nico Gaitan is not exactly a striker. He seems to be more of a winger creator type. So I think it was fortunate that Portland wasn't looking for that. They already have Valeri. They already have Diego there, so they're all good.
I believe there was something about when Valeri first joined the league, the Fire were offered Valeri, and we didn't take him. I just remember that story.
I believe that's true. I don't know if Danny knows anything about it.
I've heard similar, but I don't know if I can verify that enough.
Yeah, it's a legend. It's a legend.
Well, what it comes down to is there's been so many big names. Didier Drogba was rumored to be coming back here at some point, but then he went over to Montreal. And then that name, Diego Valeri, was supposed to be coming here. And we didn't even know what the commodity was at the time. It only once he came to MLS did he really become what we know him to be. And then wasn't there another couple big names?
There was Jermaine Jones supposed to come to the Fire. It was Alejandro Bedoya.
Brad Guzan.
Supposed to come to the Fire.
Brad Guzan, Jonathan Spector, and just names that the Fire didn't necessarily nail. But then here, all of a sudden comes Nico Gaitan through the woodwork, and to hear that the Fire got a player like Nico Gaitan is stunning. I'm not sure how it's going to affect the lineup, but okay, let's get into a little bit of his history. He started in Argentina with Boca Juniors. He was sold for about 8 million or so euros to to Benfica, or was it to a Portugal team?
Benfica. That is a Portugal team.
That is a Portugal team. And then from Benfica, he was sold to Atletico, correct?
Yes. I'm checking this up right now.
And so when he was at Atletico, he was they run a more defensive system that may have not necessarily meshed as well with Nico Gaitan's offensive abilities. I know he's not really defensively oriented. He's very offensively oriented. He's got a wicked left foot. He seems to prefer it, and is a diminutive player, 5'7" to 5'9", depending on where you're looking at. Decently pacey and a really good dribbler creator, it seems. I don't know if we have any.
I would say you should add something that the Fire haven't had a ton of. I know they've had more with Alexander Katai joining. He's been a very good one-on-one player. He seems to be the most aggressive in those circumstances. And we're seeing that with Jan Frankowski, where he's starting to get a feel for that side of his game, or we're starting to get a feel for that side of his game. Seeing it in his start with the Fire here. So yeah, you look at if you can get those three on a front line, or a supporting line, I should say, behind Nikolic and or CJ Sapong, you're starting to feel pretty good. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but how it all is going to fit together is going to be very fascinating.
Absolutely. We'll definitely get right into that very shortly here. Just a real short. He had a horror collision last year. With I think he collided with a player and fell down to the ground, started having like somewhat of a seizure. And then another player, Yannick Carrasco, came over and tried to help save him. So when you're having a seizure on the ground, I believe you're supposed to put the player on the side of on their side so the tongue does not roll back. And I'm not exactly sure if that's what Carrasco did, but he definitely helped out a little bit with saving Nico Gaitan's life. Basically, just a year ago, you could see this video. It was pretty intense.
And it's interesting that it was him who saved him, because he also went to the Chinese Super League with the same player.
Yeah, they both came from Atletico, I believe.
Yeah.
Actually, the interesting thing about that is that the team, Yilfang Diang, or I believe the ownership group there has some ties to Atletico Madrid, so that's how they were able to facilitate that. And then Chicago Fire is able to sign him on a free transfer because I think Danny was mentioning it's because they were over term on their DP limits essentially, so they had to cut somebody loose. I think he was due. He only had a year left on his contract, so I guess he was elected to go, and their loss is the Fire's gain.
I remember there was some conversation about how Gaitan was getting available at that moment, because it was right at the time where there was a lot of discussion about LA Galaxy's designated players and that sort of situation, and how MLS was trying to deal with it. And meanwhile, I don't remember who, I think it was Tenorio, who was pointing towards China, saying, they said you have to get rid of that player, and they got rid of that player. So it's an interesting look between two different leagues in terms of how they handle roster regulations.
Yeah, MLS isn't always the most convoluted when it comes to rules, isn't it?
Definitely not. But they did eventually make LA Galaxy ultimately terminate the contract and buy out the contract for Dos Santos. So that is different. And of course, the conversation with Tenorio is, do we bring on a fourth DP? Do we change the rules? We had this conversation with Stam Stexel a few weeks ago. What's going to do? Is it a time for MLS to change the rules for transfers and for DPs and TAM? Paid quite a bit of money for this year outside of the budget, but that was paid for by ownership. Does that sound right, Danny?
Yeah, I'm not entirely clear on the specifics. It's not the easiest thing to explain. But yeah, so there's a set of TAM that each team gets that is, I guess, sort of league provided, and the discretionary is on the discretion of each team. So this is, I guess, the way they described it in the press release, there's a little bit of both. I believe, based on my own keeping track and knowledge, that the Fire's pool of TAM had been kind of dwindling. So I think this is more, they sort of, I don't even know if ran out is even the correct way to say that, but they needed to dip into this discretionary TAM to be able to acquire him.
It sounds like they have the ability to purchase more, up to a limited amount. Right. And then
this is basically a sign of them spending some money. Even if he still would have to be making, and it was a free transfer, which is a big deal. The Chinese team was just happy to get free of his salary because they couldn't use him at this point. But he still will, if he's going to not be a DP, he has to be making $1.5 million or under. I believe that's still the cutoff for that, for the TAM to be able to buy him down. So I imagine he's somewhere in that ballpark, though.
I think so. And then the rumor has it is that he has an option for next year, but if he is retained, he would be retained as a DP.
Yeah, I think part of that is, I'm glad you brought that up. He should be prorated for this season. Now, of course, the season's not even 10% of the way in, but that still factors in.
Oh, I did not realize that.
Yeah, we've had that come. I believe that was with Katai, was something similar, where that's why he was a TAM player last season, because he did not. He started as a loan player, and then the Fire were able to work the system to get him as a DP this year with the transfer fee. And that was part of why there was some logistical issues with the negotiations with him last season. But yes, that's somewhat similar in that way. but he was a transfer fee, and Gaitan does not.
So the curious thing about Gaitan though is a lot of the TAM players, they're TAM players, and a lot of the DP players are maybe an echelon above TAM players. Gaitan, he might be an echelon above. He might be a DP player, as he's going to be getting essentially a DP contract salary next year. But we're getting him at a DTAM rate. That has to be huge, huge for the Fire's roster, I think.
Yeah, and also just you're looking at that option for 2020, where he could become a DP. You're looking at the DPs on the roster now. We talked about Katai. He also has an option for next season, or the Fire have an option for him for next season. It's the same thing as with Gaitan. Nikolic is out of contract, and Schweinsteiger is out of contract. And who knows if either one of those could be back, but there is some flexibility in the longer term, or at least going into 2020, if they want to keep Gaitan and have to move him to a DP spot. There are ways they can do that. Of course, you don't want to lose Schweinsteiger or Nikolic, although who knows if Schweinsteiger would want to come back anyway. But that's another discussion. But just saying, there's some flexibility in that part.
Who knows if we're looking for some sort of value out of Nikolic soon.
Yeah, especially with CJ Sapong playing well, that would be a heck of a gamble to try and sell him or trade him as opposed to re-signing him or letting him go. But sure, that's a possibility.
I think with Gaitan coming in, I think it's really going to benefit a player like Nikolic. Just to have that creative, we're getting like an Almiron type, I feel like, in Gaitan. Do you think that? I mean, just like in his ability to maybe drive forward with the ball and to maybe play make in a similar way as Almiron. Sure, you're not going to get the actual explosiveness and ability of Almiron, but you're getting maybe a poor man's Almiron.
Maybe. I'll say for Almiron, as a quick side note, seeing him in person, I think he missed, either was hurt and came off the bench, I think the first time that he came to Chicago in 2017, but seeing him in person, he's one of the fastest players on the ball I've ever seen. Straight line speed, I don't know that he's that exceptional. David Akan's pretty fast. There's plenty of fast players in MLS. But his speed on the ball, like it was faster at times. It felt like on the ball than off. So he was just an absolutely dynamic player. So I'd be very careful throwing that comparison out there. I think maybe even someone like, just to throw Argentines out there, Diego Valeri or even Sebastian Blanco, also on Portland. That kind of that Argentine style of technical player who's creative in midfield, not the biggest player. I think you want something along that lines of production. Maybe even Lucho Acosta with DCO. He's smaller than Gaitan, but yeah, there's a track record of these guys succeeding in MLS, and the Fire maybe have one of those players now.
Yeah, I'm with somebody like, because we were just talking about CJ Sapong and versus what would be Nico, and the difference between the two of them is that Sapong is a target man forward. He is going to be the guy in the box who gets up to the balls, who's going to be physical. Nico is a technical striker. He's going to be getting passes in. And having somebody like Gaitan's going to be helping Nico a whole lot more than he probably helps Sapong with that, with his passing ability.
Yeah, and Sapong's a little bit more dynamic player. I know even Dax McCarty, when I talked to him after the LA game or in between the LA and the Orlando games in the middle of the week, he said we haven't had a striker like CJ in terms of his, I think he even used the word dynamism, that speed, strength, ability to be physical, hold the ball up. We saw it in that goal against Orlando, the header that and Nikolic is a pretty solid player in the air, but he's nothing like what CJ Sapong scored against in that goal in Orlando. That was a very impressive header. So Sapong gives them a different element in the attack, and Gaitan can probably feed both of them. Nikolic is just a solid poacher. He knows where to be. He's usually very clinical in his finishing. I know he wasn't against Orlando, but you always want depth. They've talked about that. We've talked about it. I mean, we meaning the Fire community, whatever you want to call it. That lack of depth hurt them in 2017 when they had a good starting 11, and then injuries kind of caught up with them. 2018, they had even less depth, and it showed throughout the year. So you're looking at an attack that could have Sapong or Nikolic on the bench, probably Sapong, but he's hot right now, so they might ride that a little bit. And you're looking at what already appeared to be a solid front six or so, and then you're adding another guy on top of that. So you're giving yourself that depth that they haven't had. I don't know, guys. How long? Several years? The 2012 team had this kind of depth?
I don't know.
Further back than that?
Maybe even further back. I mean, at least the front 11 and then a couple of the guys that are just right behind. I mean, right, like you were saying, where do we put we're going to get, maybe this is time to get into this, where do we play these guys? And let's just quickly mention, in your article, Danny, you mentioned that Gaitan won't be playing in Saturday's game against Sounders.
Yeah, he's not expected to join the team. The way it was phrased to me was they expect him to join about this time next week. Mm-hmm. So he will not be playing Saturday. With the international breaks, they don't play the following weekend. They have 2 weeks between Saturday's match and then the one on the 30th. I would expect him to be ready for that. But they still could ease him in. I'm not going to promise he's going to start or anything. But, yeah, he won't play Saturday, and I would expect him to be at least somewhat integrated by the following match, though. So
that's March 30th as the following match against New York Red Bulls. That'll be at home in Bridgeview. Probably going to be a sellout now.
That's a lot. We'll see. Hopefully the weather's nice, because we didn't have nice weather against Orlando, and that cost them in terms of attendance. And even though today has been pretty good in Chicagoland, I don't know about Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday it's supposed to instantly drop tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, that might change things. Yeah, that definitely might affect attendance. So maybe not a full house on March 30th, but that's this weekend, so it's the Seattle Sounders. New York Red Bulls will be March 30th. One thing, Gaitan created 86 chances for playing for Yifang Dalian. I think that was the second most productive player in that of the league during that time, so he's highly productive as far as creating. So that'll be huge. And if he's going to be a big-time creator, where do we play? Where's the best position to play this guy with this current roster, with a player already there like Georgie, with two awesome wingers already in Frankowski and Katai, but also some players that have some maneuverability, positional movement maneuverability.
Yeah.
So where are we going to see Gaitan probably most deployed? I know that he has a wicked left foot, and so that makes me think: are we going to see a lot of inside forward on that right side?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You have basically three wingers now, and with some flexibility for sure. Frankowski and Gatai, I think you want to be on the wings. I think they prefer to be there. Mm-hmm. I think Frankowski probably more than the other two should stay on the wing because of his speed.
He's athletic. He's very athletic.
Yeah. So yeah, you want to be able to let him run those flanks. Mm-hmm. And maybe Katai is most suited to play centrally, even though I still think he's got a little bit of that Arturo Alvarez cutting inside in his game. I don't know if there's somewhat different players otherwise, but definitely that one-on-one ability and cutting inside. So he moves inside, he kind of loses that, but he's able to drift. I noticed that there was one play, I think it was in the first half of the LA match, where Frankowski was in the left wing. There was some build-up, some interplay between him and I believe Corrales on the left wing. And Katai had drifted. I don't know if you guys play the journey or like the play mode in FIFA where you're stuck to a player, but it's kind of how I play that, where it's like you kind of want to get to the ball, so you ignore your position and drift over a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's a video game, you can get away with it.
Oh yeah.
Katai did that on this one sequence where he was the right winger, and because I know they swap at moments, but this play Katai shifts all the way over. He wasn't all the way in the wing, but was on the left half of the field.
I remember seeing this, Danny. I remember noting this too. I'm like, whoa, they're both on the same side for some reason. Go on.
Right, yeah. So they combined on a play, and then Katai got a shot. I think it was like a quick 1-2, or maybe one of them made a quick dribble in between, but Katai ended up getting a shot on goal out of that. So there is definitely flexibility with those players, and I think what you want to see, and what I think we saw some of in stretches in 2017 was kind of the free-flowing fire attack. And I think when that team was kind of hitting on all cylinders in the attack, it was when Matt Polster was having the freedom to run forward on the right back. It was when David Acom was having the freedom, creating well with his speed, and Nikolic was poaching in front, and the midfield was under control, and you could see just that movement And I think Katai and Frankowski could get there with some time, and now you throw Gaitan in there. And the thing is, what we saw last season where they weren't able to achieve that was Katai had that run when he joined the team early on when he was on fire. And then they picked up his option and he slumped, coincidentally or not, I don't know. But teams did start to sort of double team him or focus in on him. And the Fire's attack was Katai or nothing, and teams were just putting numbers on him, and it ended up being nothing towards the end of the year. And that's when that losing streak happened. I mean, that was one of the reasons, at least.
It sounds like David Accam when it was just David Accam.
Right, exactly. Right? So I think you see Katai and now Frankowski and then Gaitan, and you won't be able to focus in on one or two of those guys. That's ideal. Now, of course, it has to fit together, and that chemistry has to come. But I think that's the thought process probably in the minds of Nelson Rodriguez and Veljko Paunovic right now.
Mm-hmm. You have some comments, Jiggly?
Well, I mean, I really like the idea of having somebody who's going to be cutting in, but with where exactly Gaitan's going to be playing, I think he's probably going to be placed at that number 10 spot because, I mean, the whole thing is everybody's been asking for a number 10, for specifically an Argentinian number 10. And this guy is right here. Yes, he plays winger, but he's pretty much a number 10. He's considered an enganche. So if we're going to be playing him, he's probably going to be playing in that spot. But then the question becomes, what do we do with Georgi Mihailovic then?
Where does Georgie go? What do you think, Danny?
Well, yeah, so we kind of talked about this off air, and I think I mentioned it in my article on Pro Soccer USA today about
check out Danny's work, by the way.
Little plug. But you can have a 3-5-2, and they've had a 3-5-2. We've seen it each of the 2 years Schweinsteiger's been with the team that he's dropped a sweeper. They did it even in 2017 during the good run, and it had pretty good success. I don't know that was the reason for the success, but they did have success in that formation. And then we saw it a bit more last season because they couldn't find a center back partner for Johan Kapelov. So now they have Marcelo. Well, it's too early to say if he's going to be good or not yet, but he's going to be the guy, right? They spent money on him. They didn't bring in anyone else at center back. They still probably need to from a simple numbers perspective because the only other center back on the roster is Grant Willard. And you simply need more bodies in that.
And it seems like it was reported that one of the center backs that they were in for has fizzled out.
Yeah, and they're going to keep looking. I know that's something Rodriguez and Paunovic have both talked about, that, hey, we're looking. We know we need to add more. And this is one of those things. You can be okay with the starting center backs they have now, but it's okay until you have an injury or two, and then suddenly you're throwing desperation moves out there. And that's what happened through a lot of 2018. You know, they had injuries. Jonathan Campbell missed the first part of the year. Christian Dean missed a chunk and struggled in the beginning. And Lillard didn't hit the ground running as a rookie, and all of a sudden your defense struggled. So they're going to try and avoid that this season. But you can look at Schweinsteiger dropping into a back three with Marcelo and Kapelov. I could see Georgie dropping back with Dax McCarty, and then those two can control the center midfield. I think Georgie is actually probably more suited to be a slightly deeper midfielder. If you want to go into the geeky soccer parlance, he's probably more of an 8 than a 10. I think we saw mixed things from him in the first two games. He showed some really good stuff, and the good vision, his precision was a little bit off, but not enough to think he can't do it. But then there's also some moments where he would miss a pass or miss a play. So it's like, I mean, that's what you expect of a 20-year-old player too, right? He's definitely made strides in his game, and I think his confidence is high when the national team helps with that. But I think he can play a little bit deeper and simply be a connector when you have Frankowski, Katai, and Gaitan, supporting maybe Nikolic and Sapong. So, I mean, is that the way to go? Do you have enough defensive cover in that lineup if you go Schweinsteiger, Marcelo Kapelhoff with Dax and Georgie above them?
And then a sub 6 foot back line? Or maybe Basti's 6 foot, so it's not really. But
yeah, but I have memories of Basti struggling in the air against, I believe it was Kai Kamara maybe in one of the games last season. But yeah, there's going to be some big strikers in MLS. I know Kapelov has said that over his years with the team. There's a lot of physical strikers in MLS.
Yeah.
And it is not easy to match up with some of those guys. And, we already saw it with Zlatan, in the season opener.
I got a question about Georgie for you. Somebody was talking to me on Reddit, and they were asking about his why he was going 60 minutes these past few matches. And I was thinking it's just because they're probably bringing him back from ACL. He was at national team duty. And so, coming back from an injury so big as that, I thought that, they'll take it easy with him. Is that what's going on there? Or is that just because, maybe he was showing some mistakes?
Well, I think different situations in the different matches so far. I think the Orlando match, everything gets thrown out of whack when you have a red card.
Mm-hmm.
And then Georgia got subbed off 5 minutes after Corrales' red card. So I don't know that you can really read into that too much, because when you're down a man in a goal, everything becomes tactical in terms of your substitutions, and not necessarily, we only wanted this guy to go this many minutes or he's struggling. I think it's simply getting the shape and finding a way to scrap out that point that they did. As far as the LA match, I think it's fair to question some of those substitutions, or at least, wonder why they happened the way they did. I think Katai was one of the most dangerous players. Him and Frankowski were showing some of that chemistry in the early part of that second half in LA, and then Katai got subbed off right after the goal, the first LA goal, and the Fire's attack did not look the same after. And I think part of that too was the midfield. That LA had started to push forward, the Fire were struggling to absorb the pressure. But again, we're looking at a small sample size here too. Like I said, the Orlando match is weird because of the red card, and then you only have one other match to go off of. I think it's too early to call it a trend or that they're being careful with him or anything yet.
So we're kind of talking about it, and we're talking right around it. Corrales got that red card. Who's going to start at left back next match?
Do you even have a left back next match?
Do we? Don't we have a kid?
No, actually, apparently he's injured. I was looking on Transfermarkt, and it says he's got a hamstring injury or something.
Yeah, he's been nursing an injury since the preseason, I believe.
You're talking about Edwards?
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. I didn't
no, not Edwards.
I'm talking about Andre Reynolds.
Oh, yeah. Reynolds.
They both have been nursing injuries, actually, so it's funny you say that. So I think Edwards was sort of like I don't know about game time decision, but the Fire traveled to LA Wednesday, and Panovich had told me on the day before that they were deciding if he wanted to travel or not. He obviously did not. Reynolds first of all, I don't think Reynolds, I wouldn't expect him to play very much this season. They may give him a couple appearances just to get him in the team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they signed him with the intention of him getting minutes with the first team consistently this year. He's only 18. I think it's more of a project, but yeah.
Oh, we do. So, we got a question here from former Spitting Fire podcaster Brian O'Leary. How can you win without fullbacks in this league? A lot of teams figure it out, I think.
You just put all of your players up in the attack. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah. Do you guys remember Zdeněk Zeman? He's a former Roma coach and coached over Italy and different parts of Europe.
Zdeněk
he was famous for an all-out attack. He would have, and I feel like we've seen this. I think Atlanta did it. We've seen it a couple teams in MLS. On a kickoff, he would have every player stand at the halfway line. So they'd be spread all the way across the width of the halfway line and just boot the ball down and press and send tons of numbers forward. I don't think Veljko Panovich is ever going to do anything that crazy. But there is history in soccer of teams just kind of going all out in bizarre ways.
I remember seeing the video of, I think it's RB Leipzig doing that, where they just sent everyone down and they actually scored off of it.
Yeah.
But any other time I've seen it, it's failed miserably.
Yeah, it takes an incredible amount of fitness from your players because you're asking them to run like crazy, basically.
And Jeffrey and I have been talking about it. Really, modern soccer is going the way of the fullback and the winger. It's always been kind of just going to the winger, but now it's more so even about that fullback and that fullback over kind of just going to the winger. But now it's more so even about that fullback and that fullback overlap.
But in that reference, though, it's not necessarily about fullback defending. It's more about covering ground and going up and down and attacking.
Mm-hmm.
So
good point.
Especially when you see a lot of 3-5-2s, like I know Toronto when they ran that when they won in 2017, they were true wing backs where they had to track back in moments and play defense, but they were definitely focal points in the attack and created the width going forward.
Mm.
So as that modern fullback evolves, it is more becoming an offensive position. So as we look at the Fire's fullbacks and you say, okay, Corrales struggled defensively, but you look at the fullbacks and you say, okay, Corrales struggled defensively, but you look at what they had on the other side. Diego Campos was, a converted attacker that they sent to right back because he serves in a really good ball. I think he's a good crosser. He's fair in terms of how he's able to connect and dribble and pass and everything. And he's also a good set piece delivery guy. Defensively, I think in that LA match he was wildly out of position at times, which you would expect, right? But that's what the Fire are asking their guys to do when you don't have more experienced starting caliber fullbacks in the roster.
I think what I want to see with this backline is we keep talking about it as a 3-man backline, but really it's essentially a 5-man backline. There's the original Fire team had a 5-man backline in terms of we had 3 real defenders, real center backs, and then Diego Gutierrez would play further up the pitch and then come track back and make it and turn it into a full 4-man backline. Mm-hmm. And there'd also be someone there towards the right side. And I think that's the sort of thing we need to get a player who can play that specific position. We had that player in Matt Polster. Matt Polster could do that, where he could play that attacking position and then instantly move back towards a defensive position and make the backline whole again. And we don't exactly have that right now. I think, we got to find a way to make somebody a left wing back, and we do have one. But he's injured, or at least apparently injured. He's not ready yet with Raheem Edwards, which, if he is ready, we should instantly just send Mo over to Lansing and bring Edwards back. So,
yeah, and Edwards, similar to Campos, he's a more experienced player, but another attacker that they're converting into that spot.
So the way we're talking about it really seems like this team's about to convert, and we might not see too much of the 4-2-3-1 over the rest of the year. We might see a lot more 3-man back lines with maybe Basti as that middle pivot again.
Right, and again, this is because that's the easiest way to get your best 11 players in the field, right? Especially with the way CJ Sapong is playing. You would probably add him in that conversation, right, as one of your best 11 players. Mm-hmm. And again, and even like Dak said, that dynamism, he's a different type of attacker. We haven't seen Nikolic play in 2-striker setups too often. There were times when they were trailing where him and Alan Gordon played together, and that's when you're talking the last 20, 30 minutes of a match and you're down a goal or whatever the situation, you're chasing a goal, that's almost not even a fair judge of your tactical setup anyway, because a lot of times you're just pushing the ball forward in haste and not necessarily building up. So even that can be different. So, yeah, we'll see. I think the 3-5-2 makes sense on paper, but does it give them enough defensive cover, right? And do we see someone like Brant Bronico become more of a connector in that setup because if Bassi drops deep, you need more depth in midfield? So, yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Paunovic deals with this. I mean, do we see someone else that we don't expect go to the bench? Like, would they consider benching Gaitan? And, again, this all seems full health. The odds are one of these, let's call it front 7 or 8 guys that we would consider midfields or forwards in this setup. You have an injury and all of a sudden it goes out the window anyway. So, and that's, among that many players, it's probably going to happen, chunks of the season. So, we'll see. We may not get too much of the 3-5-2, or we could be every week. Who knows?
And you were saying about it earlier when you were talking about FIFA, but what I'm thinking about, what would I do with these guys in career mode when I look at this roster and I see that we have 3 center backs and the third one on the depth chart's Lillard. And I don't know, he's rated like a 50. I would, at that point, like you guys are saying, and we're saying, it makes sense to move Basti back just to get your best 11 on the field and just to put it in kind of FIFA terms. And I don't know, it makes sense to me that just to bring him back and that he is slower. He's not as good in the air. You have to really find a way to get the best type of center back out of him, though. And I wonder if it is that center pivot. I wonder if he might actually be better on the right or the left side and kind of being allowed to more so drift to the side than having to be relied upon being that central pivot when he has a propensity to want to maybe join the attack anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I think Schweinsteiger gives you, ball security from deep, and I know Panovich has always prioritized trying to build out of the back, and they have only sporadically throughout his tenure been able to do it. I think, like again, 2017, they did it the most successfully, but still had moments of struggling with that. And I'll say this about this hypothetical 3-5-2 we concocted here. There's a lot of ways it could go wrong. You're asking a lot of, Katai and Frankowski in terms of tracking back. Will they do that? Will they be successful at it? As you guys are pointing out, can Schweinsteiger handle, or any of those three center backs handle a big physical striker in the middle or balls in the air?
Can they handle Zlatan again?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of ways it can go wrong. I think the only thing worth saying about it is it's intriguing enough to at least see it in play for a match or two, and if there's not enough defensive cover, then maybe it's like a halftime switch where Panovich has to pull somebody and pull the plug on it. But I think it's worth considering, and it's probably worth seeing.
Definitely excited. Jiggly, got any comments?
I really think that Schweinsteiger going towards that back line could work if he's in a more forward position on the back line. It's a weird way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going back to like the original Fire because they had that sort of same problem with a ton of attacking prowess and not that much defensive depth.
Of course, we're dealing with a different MLS. Where
it's a very different MLS. But it's similar personnel issues. And we had Lubos Kubik, who he was a central midfielder. And instead of having him at central midfield, we pushed him back just a bit so that he's not exactly a holding mid, but he's not exactly a center back. He's in a weird limbo position. And I think that Schweinsteiger, at this point in his career, might be best served playing in that weird position where he's going to be that deep line playmaker, but his focus will be defense. And I think we've seen him try to slip into that sort of position, and it hasn't really quite exactly worked out, but maybe it's more we haven't really set everything up around him to work out that way.
There's a lot of attacking talent on this team, and with the introduction of Gaitan, that should hopefully, lessen some of these offensive responsibilities that some seemingly get foisted upon various players at different points of the game. With so much attacking talent, hopefully that does let Basti concentrate on doing that. And maybe, I don't know, not worrying. He likes to shout a lot. I'm just, focusing on the teammates. I wonder if Gaitan is the key to unlocking Paunovich's offense, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, we'll see. This is definitely the most attacking talent on paper that they've had. I think even more than the 2017 team, which I think was a far more balanced team. I think this one looks very attacking heavy as we see it right now.
I'm excited. Anything else we want to cover here, boys? Everybody, you can fire your last questions here for Danny and Jiggly and myself. Let us know here in the chats. Let's see. Jorge went to his first Fire game. Congrats. O'Leary says 253 all day. Says also O'Leary saying thinks Jiggly is awesome. Thank you, Danny, for coming on, by the way. Let's see. Any other topics we've covered? Jiggly, didn't you have something else you want to talk about, or did we get to it?
Yeah, we got to it. Who's going to be playing left back?
Yeah.
And I think at this point, we've kind of figured out that it's not going to be Edwards. It's not going to be Reynolds. It's probably going to be Hassler or possibly Frankowski.
I would see Campos or Hasler there before I see Frankowski, but that's not he can play that left side, so maybe that's not a horrible shout.
Or maybe moving Campos to the left side and having Frankowski play the right back.
I just wonder how well two-footed Campos is.
I'm not sure.
Because I
just remember.
Sorry, Danny, go ahead.
I think you guys are overthinking a little bit. I think the odds are it's probably Hassler and Campos on the left.
Yeah. Usted's definitely solidified things back there a lot. I'm very excited for him. Is Reynolds a center back or a wing back? I believe he's a wing back. Correct, Danny?
Yeah, he's a left back as far as I know.
And then Jeremiah Guchar, what position does he play?
He's more of a 6. I don't know if he's like a true destroyer type or more of a distributor, but I believe he's more of a defensive mid.
And are we still having trouble with international slots?
So that's an interesting question. I think you have to just understand that Rodriguez plays a game with that. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but he said this, I believe it was at the draft this year, where someone asked him, how are you feeling about your international slots? And he made a comment like, we successfully juggled 9 or 10 or 11 last season with 8 spots. And so it's like, I think we can do that again. And of course, they did acquire one, and the price on those has gone up, apparently, based on what they paid and what we've seen other teams pay. In terms of the amount of allocation money you have to give up for them. They have 9 spots. They have more than 9 players. Like Elliot Collier, for example, is on loan. We think, Edwards might be on loan. I know he's currently hurt. But they are juggling, they're playing the game and juggling the spots. And there also is expected to be some green card relief on that front sometime this season too. So
that would be awesome. Sorry, go ahead.
Hopefully it comes in soon. I mean, at this point, we would have to loan out Mo Adams. And he's okay. He hasn't made the 18. So that's why I'm thinking if we need Edwards soon enough, we should probably be making that move. But since Edwards is still apparently injured, we can't exactly do that. And Mo Adams is kind of stuck in a weird spot right now. And I think I really want to see him play, but I don't think he has too much of an option to be able to play right now with the current Fire team that we have. He's a defensive midfielder, which we don't have that many of, but there's going to be players being pushed back towards the defense, so that means there's going to be less room for him.
Probably Brant Bronico is going to be ahead of him on the depth chart too. I mean, maybe he's a direct replacement for Dax at the mid, and maybe if we see Georgie drop into that center mid role and Baskey back, maybe Brant's the go-to sub for that center mid spot. And so, yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about what you were talking about. What would you do with this team in career mode? At this point, you might just want to start moving out players because we have great depth on the attack, almost too much. We have a lot of central midfielders, almost too much, and we have no left back. We do not have a left back currently. We don't have anything at fullback. So at this point, we might have to start making moves, and Dax McCarty might be one of the people that's going to have to go. It's weird. He's a wonderful leader. I love him, and he didn't look that good in the first game, but he looked a lot better in the second game. A lot of people looked a lot better in the second game, but there's just not that much room left for him, and if we can get a good deal out of him, sending him to Orlando and getting a left back, I think you were talking about this during the last podcast, and I know we were talking about this at the game, about getting someone like Joao Moutinho, which I didn't even know he was on Orlando, but getting someone like him for Dax, someone on a fullback position for one of our superfluous players at this point.
Danny?
Sure.
I don't know.
It's a hard decision.
It's a real hard decision, and you definitely don't want to trade away one of your leaders. But you definitely want to maximize value. And if you could get a position of need for a position that's maybe overflowing, or a position you can maybe get away with somebody else at, or find time for what you're saying, find time for Mo Adams, maybe by removing Dax, or for Brant Bronico too. Maybe that does help out. Real quick, Danny, joke question: do you think CJ Brown might be willing to suit up again?
There's your fourth center back, right?
And what about Klopas suiting up again while we're at it?
Oh boy, I'm embarrassed to say, this is a funny story actually. Was it for the All-Star game? I believe we had a media game at the Fire pitch on the north side, and Klopas was there among others. And I hadn't kicked the ball. I mean, I play rec now, so I'm not as rusty. I'm not going to say I'm any good at the moment. The skills of my youth have gone, but I hadn't touched the ball in probably a year or two at that point. First touch, I kick a pass to Klopas. It is a solid 20 feet away from him, he just stops and stares at me and goes, even in my prime, I couldn't reach. This is just warm up, mind you. And he's first like in a circle passing the ball around, and he just says, yeah, even in my prime, I couldn't reach that one. And that's about as embarrassed as you can be. Like, oh, no, that's a typical first touch, and you haven't touched the ball in a year.
Hey, we need a fullback. How about we get someone like Jim Curtin or Sega to come back?
I'm seeing Zach Thornton as a shout.
Area.
Zach Thornton could take off the goalie gloves and maybe go left back.
That was a joke thing that we were talking about on Twitter. But if we see Richard Sanchez lining up at left back, I will lose my mind. I don't know what I'll do, but I'm gonna do something fun.
It worked out the other way for Ederson of Man City. He was actually a converted left back to goalkeeper.
The second coming of Jorge Campos.
That'd be awesome. Real quick, let me finish up a little scouting report here. I don't know if you guys want to. You can add in your comments if I maybe don't misspeak. This is a scouting report from like 2012, so it's definitely 7 years old. But I imagine some of it is definitely similar. But players get older in age out of things, so and out of habits and behavior. So versatile across the midfield, attacking midfield line, left wing, cam, right wing. I think we're gonna see that. There seemed to be indicating that he's more comfortable on the touchline rather than the middle of the park, but we kind of spoke about he could potentially dominate MLS talent and be really, really good in the middle of the park.
Yeah, as long as he moves around, if he has that movement around the park, he's going to be able to get those chances on the touchline.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, he's an outside shooting threat, whether he's outside of the box, inside of the box, or even just 5 yards wide of it. He's got a wicked curler of a left foot. Not necessarily Robin-like, but maybe but there's a comparison for a ridiculous left-footed shot. Good center of gravity. He's 5'7", small, but not easy to knock off the ball. He can truck through a tackle, they're saying, and he's apparently particularly left-footed. In FIFA, they say in FIFA at least they have it that he favors that foot. So I don't know if maybe he doesn't really have a right foot. I don't know if you guys have any news on that.
If you don't have a left foot, you could just use a Cruyff turn. I mean, if you only use 1 foot, Johan Cruyff only used 1 foot throughout his entire career. It's fine.
That's great, Jiggly. That's great. Comfort in possession. So a byproduct of his stocky build and versatility, he'll be happy on the ball. So maybe one thing we've seen with the Fire and the past 2 games, they've been heavy in possession. Maybe this is the key to unlocking that offense for this offense that wants to be heavier in possession than maybe a counterattacking team.
It's very interesting to see how this offense has done things, because I remember at the beginning of the season I said we needed to kind of just play ugly. We needed to make sure that the ball was staying in their end even if we weren't holding possession. We needed to, my whole thing of stab, don't pull, not exactly playing out of the back, but we're actually kind of doing it well, surprisingly, especially with Marcelo, who is a center back who is great on the ball. We already knew Cap was good on the ball. So with 2 center backs that can actually pass now, makes it look a whole lot better. And I don't know. I don't think that we actually have had much trouble with unlocking and making passes, and it's a lot about finishing right now. And if we get somebody who is a lot more specific with that final pass, I know Frankowski has put in good balls, but there's also that one play in the LA game where we should have gotten that goal, but he put it just a bit too far ahead in front of, I think it was Katai who was on the end of that, or it was this, or, you have the other side where for some reason our striker isn't exactly scoring. We still need another offensive. Okay, I think I just stopped myself. I was going to a point there and I just built up to nothing. But the first part of it, yes.
I will say this as far as possession. I think you're looking at it a little bit in the wrong way. I think you want to have the ball and control the game because you don't want to be relying on your defense as it's currently constructed to hold off teams for sustained periods. Mm-hmm. I think the LA match showed that. Orlando did not create a lot going forward, but I think the weather kind of made that game strange anyway, where it was never going to be a pretty game. I think Orlando was very solid defensively until the very end, which is ironic. But you look at what the Fire have done in both of their games is win the midfield battle for the majority of the match. And that is going to be key for them because I think if they're going to drop back and absorb pressure, they're going to struggle. So I think that's more a statement on the defense than the attack. Like, you want that attack to have the ball, and it looks like they should be able to. Like, they're not going to need to play on the break to create chances. Like, that looks like you have enough players who can beat players with speed, beat players one-on-one, and beat players with passes. That you should be able to create chances through the run of play, ideally.
I think you hit on it too when you were talking. You basically mentioned the way they played last year, which was invite guys to come at them almost, and they played a little too deep. So hopefully we do see the opposite of that, a lot more forward thrusting and control of the ball, but more forward thrusting and not more so playing out of the back, but keeping it on those dangerous wings. O'Leary, and we said this, if Fire can figure out that defensive woes, the defensive woes, they could be a real threat. That's true. A couple of weaknesses for Gaitan real quick. Inability to play in a flat four. We're not signing him to be a Georgi Mihailovic, Basti Schweinsteiger central midfielder, so that makes sense. But defensive contribution, not really good, but that's to be expected. And he would be very good in a possession-hungry, high-pressing team. Or against a possession-hungry, high-pressing team, is what they're saying. Being such a creative outlet. So he's going to bring a lot to the Chicago offense, and hopefully he's not a bust. Do you guys see any chances of that?
Anything can happen. Injury, unhappiness. I mean, MLS is one of those leagues where on paper, any player who has had recent success in Europe and is still in his prime should be good enough to succeed in MLS. But there's a lot of reasons it could go wrong. So I'd say, sure, you'd expect him to do well. But who knows what happens?
I did want to touch on specifically, we were talking about him playing centrally. There was an issue during the last game that I just saw while I was rewatching it. The Fire kind of just formed a circle around the entire Orlando team. We had no one in the in the center. I know, like, my dad came home yelling about it. We had no central presence, and I did see that we just kind of had a circle around them. And I don't know exactly how, like, it could work with just going around them, but it means that we are lacking a lot in the central midfield. And if we're getting somebody who doesn't like to play centrally, it might cause issues.
Any thoughts, Danny?
Sure. I mean, again, I don't know enough about his game to really get into the nitty-gritty of that.
Right.
I think depending on the formation, we already talked about it, based on personnel, there's a lot of ways the defensive shape could be problematic. So until we see it, you don't know how that could play out. That's all I'm saying is you want to see the best players on the field together and see if it works. And if it doesn't, it's a 34-game regular season, and hopefully you can figure it out quickly and find a solution. So I think you have to run through the possibilities, both in training and then in matches, and see what fits and figure it out. I think this is going to be, on that note, one of the most, I guess, I don't want to say difficult as in, like, he doesn't have talent, because I would say the 2016 team was very difficult for Panovich in terms of just the lack of talent he had. But it's going to test Panovich's coaching chops in terms of figuring out how to get this team to work, right? So it's first world problem having too many talented attacking players, right? But is absolutely going to test his ability to make it all work.
All right, I got a couple final questions for us as we'll kind of close it down here. Final questions here. What do we all expect out of Gaitan? I'm expecting, maybe 8 assists. I'm just going to throw some stats out there. 8 or 9 assists and maybe 4 or 5 goals. You guys think more goals than assists? What do you think?
I think double-digit assists. When he was first signed, I was like, I looked angry about it, but it's like, no, I think he's going to do great, and that was the problem that I saw with him, pushing people out of positions. But at this point, about him solely doing well, he's going to do well in this league.
I think I lean more towards your first prediction there with single digits in both, but I don't know that would be bad either. I mean, he's going to miss the first 3 matches. He's going to have to integrate after that. I think if you get like 5 and 9 out of him, that's solid. Again, but that's only because you're expecting Frankowski to give you some goals, you're expecting Katai to give you a handful of goals, and you're expecting Sapong and Nikolic to give you a solid number of goals. So you don't need a ton of goals from Gaitan. I think ideally, yeah, you want like 8 and 12 or something. I don't know if that's realistic, missing a few games and then having to integrate into the team. But I think somewhere in that range is pretty plausible, though.
Yeah, and my last question for this weekend, because Pano now has this new piece, but he's yet to integrate it, obviously. Do we see him start to tinker with the lineup and maybe instead deploy something different this weekend? What do you think the odds are of that?
Well, this week it's interesting because like obviously Gaitan's not going to be available and Corrales is out as we've talked about. So the options are somewhat more limited. I don't imagine. Well, let's put it this way though, because you're going to have Sapong and Nikolic, and Nikolic missed the opener. Sapong started on a wing position, but Frankowski came off the bench because he was coming off a minor injury in training. So you're going to have Sapong, who scored 2 goals in 2 matches, Nikolic, who missed the opener and didn't look super sharp against Orlando, and then you want to get Katai and Frankowski on the wings. So what can they do on that front? It could be interesting. It's the first time we'll see, or at least we think we'll see, all the attacking options outside of Gaitan, but the standard full lineup that they entered the season with. Nikolic and Frankowski each missing a start. We'll see how that shakes out. So it'll be different just because you expect the players available to Panovich being different. And
not having Corrales available is definitely going to change things. So maybe we do. So maybe he doesn't change anything. But I kind of am leaning towards that we might see the first deployment of the 3-man back line with this weekend, and him trying to start to play the way that they want to play with Gaitan. Is Gaitan the next Nery Castillo?
Boom.
Wow.
Sizzle.
No. No, that's hopefully not. Let's not mention that name anymore. But I think that's about it, boys. Any final thoughts? Any final comments? You guys think that this pushes the Fire over the edge to make the playoffs or to make them an actual contender?
I don't feel like it changes that much about the way that we're going to be performing. He's going to do well, but I think that without him, we'd have Mihalovic who would be playing well. We'd have Frankowski playing well. If everyone plays well and Gaitan plays well, I don't exactly think he changes that much about our attack. It's about our defense that we should be very, very worried about.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he was a big need. Although I'll say it this way: on paper, the Fire's attack already looked good and did not look good in either of the first 2 matches. There were stretches they looked good in LA, but the only goal they got was basically an LA mistake. So I think you have to kind of balance why they looked dangerous. They weren't actually putting chances on target and scoring. So he makes them better, and I think it may force Panovich and the Fire to be more attacking, which probably is good for this team anyway. As I think I said it either on Twitter in one of my stories after the LA match, when they were up 1-0, you saw they had chances to go up 2, but then they eventually did end up sitting back. And this is not like a team that can sit back on a 1-0 lead. They're going to have to keep going for more goals. And so from that perspective, this just gives them more ability to do that. So does it make them a ton better? I think it raises their upside. I think there's still after 2 matches, you could say they did not look like a playoff team. It's way too early to make that a firm prediction or assumption, but they did not look like a playoff team in those first 2 matches. They showed glimpses of how they could be better, and that's still true. And even with Gaitan, I think, okay, maybe their upside is a little bit of more of a contender. I don't know if there's an MLS Cup team without more defensive reinforcement, though. I don't think you even consider that without significant improvement on that side of the ball.
It's a risky Vegas bet. The odds just went up too because they got a Gaitan. So definitely was better to make the bet last week before Gaitan arrived. But a risky bet with Vegas to take the Fire to win. Based upon what we've seen right now, I totally agree with you there, Danny Santaromita. Take a look at Danny on Twitter. Take a look at his work and writing. Thanks so much for coming on and taking the time.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys. Appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Jiggly, also take a look at Jiggly's work. Follow Jiggly on Twitter as well. I'll have all their information in the details in our comments below. Check us out on Stitcher. Go ahead.
My most recent article just came out, and I forgot to tweet it, so I tweeted it while we were doing this live stream. So my last tweet is my most recent article for midweek training.
And Danny just put out an article today too, so be sure to take a look at that. We were talking about some of the stuff inherent within during this podcast. But be sure to follow Danny for great work. Follow Jiggly for some great work. Check out Spitting Fire. We're here on YouTube. We're also on Stitcher, and you can find us on iTunes podcasts now too. Give us a rating; it helps us out. So we'll have a podcast going for the post game for Seattle. We'll figure that out probably on Sunday. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks for your comments and thanks for your time. Go Fire! Any last comments from you guys?
That's it. Thanks a lot for having me again.
All right, thank you, Danny.
Red Stars.
Yes, go Red Stars. Thank you too, Jiggly. All right, like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon for future broadcasts. Thanks for joining us on Spitting Fire. We'll see you guys next time. Fire it up, footballers. Oh, well, maybe fire it down. Later.